Rachel Reeves' recent grilling by Andrew Neil has left Labour scrambling to contain the fallout. What was supposed to be an opportunity for Reeves, the shadow chancellor, to present Labour as a credible alternative to the Tories has instead turned into a political disaster. Neil's relentless questioning, combined with Reeves' inability to provide clear answers, exposed glaring contradictions in Labour's economic policies. This wasn't just an uncomfortable interview, it was a public dismantling of the party's credibility on key issues. The interview started with Neil zeroing in on Labour's proposed rise in national insurance contributions. Labour has repeatedly claimed to champion working-class families, yet this policy would burden employers with an extra £800 per minimum wage employee. Reeves was forced to admit that workers would ultimately bear the cost through lower wages and fewer job opportunities. It was a stunning concession that undermined Labour's claim to be the party of the working people. Neil didn't let up, pressing Reeves on how Labour could reconcile its promises with the reality of its tax and spend agenda. Her responses were evasive, at best, and outright contradictory, at worst. Reeves also struggled to defend cuts to winter fuel payments for pensioners. Labour has long positioned itself as the defender of society's most vulnerable, but Reeves' justification for slashing this vital support was unconvincing. She tried to argue that the triple lock on pensions would offset these cuts, claiming pensioners would actually be £1,700 better off under Labour. But the math didn't add up, and Neil was quick to point out the flaws in her argument. The optics of a Labour Party cutting benefits for pensioners while raising taxes on workers were disastrous, and Reeves did nothing to mitigate the damage. The WASPy women, those born in the 1950s who were affected by changes to the state pension age, were another flashpoint. Labour had previously promised to compensate these women for what they lost, but Reeves backtracked, citing the cost as prohibitive. This U-turn has enraged a significant voter bloc that Labour can ill afford to alienate. Critics have accused the party of betrayal, pointing to Labour MPs who once stood shoulder to shoulder with WASPy campaigners but now dismiss their concerns. Reeves' attempt to downplay the issue only fueled the anger, with Neil pressing her on Labour's failure to deliver on its promises. Andrew Neil's interview was a masterclass in exposing political doublespeak. Every time Reeves tried to pivot to a talking point, Neil brought her back to the specifics of Labour's policies. The result was a shadow chancellor visibly uncomfortable, repeatedly caught off guard, and unable to provide coherent answers. For viewers, it was a stark reminder of Labour's struggles to present itself as a credible alternative government. For the party, it was a PR nightmare. The fallout from the interview has been swift and severe. Labour's approval ratings, already fragile, have taken another hit. The party's economic competence is now under intense scrutiny, with critics accusing it of being disconnected from the realities facing ordinary voters. Think tanks like the Institute for Fiscal Studies, IFS, and the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, have long warned about the fiscal limits Labour seems determined to ignore. The £22 billion black hole in public finances that Reeves admitted to during the interview only reinforced concerns about Labour's ability to manage the economy. This isn't just about one disastrous interview, it's about a broader crisis of credibility. Labour has spent years trying to rebuild trust with voters, particularly those in its traditional working-class heartlands. But moments like this undo that progress. When Reeves fumbles on basic questions about how Labour's policies will impact workers and pensioners, it sends a clear message: the party doesn't have a plan. And in a time of economic uncertainty, that's a fatal weakness. Neil's grilling also highlighted a deeper problem within Labour, a growing disconnect between its rhetoric and its actions. The party talks about compassion, fairness, and protecting the vulnerable, but its policies tell a different story. Raising taxes while cutting benefits is not the platform of a party that claims to stand for the working class. Labour's leadership seems more concerned with avoiding tough questions than providing real solutions. And voters are noticing. The WASPy women controversy is emblematic of Labour's broader struggles. These women feel betrayed, not just by the Tories, who accelerated the changes to the state pension age, but by Labour, which promised to right this wrong and then backed out. Reeves' dismissive tone during the interview only deepened the sense of betrayal. She claimed that 90% of women knew about the changes, as if that somehow justified the injustice. For the millions of women affected, this was salt in the wound. Labour's missteps have handed the Tories a gift. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his government are far from popular, but Labour's inability to capitalise on their weaknesses is staggering. Instead of presenting a clear, compelling alternative, Labour is mired in contradictions and U-turns. The party's promise to make Britain fairer rings hollow when pensioners are left out in the cold and workers are hit with higher taxes. The implications of this debacle are significant. Labour's path to power depends on convincing voters that it can be trusted to manage the economy. But trust is hard to earn and easy to lose. Andrew Neil's interview exposed a party that is not ready to govern, a party that talks big but falters under scrutiny. For Keir Starmer and his team, the stakes couldn't be higher. If they can't restore credibility soon, Labour risks squandering its chance to end over a decade of Conservative rule. The road ahead for Labour is clear but steep. It must address the contradictions in its policies, communicate a coherent vision for the economy, and reconnect with its core voters. Anything less will reinforce the perception that Labour is out of touch and unfit to lead. Andrew Neil's interview was a wake-up call, but whether Labour will heed it remains to be seen.